And it's still morning, 28 minutes to the top of the hour, 8 a.m. Quick time does move fast, isn't it? It is time for you when you get to realize that you have to wake up again, go harder and harder to make more money and at least strive for the better, strive for success and strive to see things happening as they supposed to happen. It is something that you always have to teach yourself that, hey, if something was hard yesterday, I should at least make it easier for me today. And if at all it is hard today, then it should be easier for me tomorrow. So live for tomorrow. Make sure you plan ahead and make sure that you're always optimistic about what the future holds for you before you actually look back at what the past has taught you, or before you actually put yourself down because the past will not be giving you good lessons about life. The reality is, and the sad context about life is, you will never get things easier unless you push harder for them and unless you continue seeing things moving faster and easier for you as an individual. All right, good morning, Uganda. This is Smart Men's Business. Now let's get into the international lab that's looking at stories making headlines away from Uganda. We start with the East African community neighbor, Tanzania. As this time around, Tanzania bans day-old chicks imports again. It's not the first time that Tanzania is banning the imports of these particular ones, but now they've apparently been able to ban them for the second time again. Tanzania has imposed a total ban on the importation of the day-old chicks effective next week, and it seeks to protect its local hatcheries and limit the inflow of substandard chicks. The ban, which takes effect on July 30th, aims to protect the local poultry market, and according to the Ministry of Livestock and Fisheries in a statement that was released on Monday, the Deputy Minister for Livestock and Fisheries, Abdallah Olega, said that the government would no longer issue import permits on chicken from Saturday. This was after a meeting with poultry business executives in the capital, Dodoma. The government, according to Olega, said is currently collecting poultry industry data to ascertain the demand for day-old chicks. Local poultry producers, that is Ongania and Nkuza chicks, had decried the rise in smuggled chicks sold at low prices, and then most incubators in the country are selling day-old chicks at an average of 2,000 Tanzanian shillings, that is roughly 0.85 US dollars, while the smuggled chicks sell at 1,200 Tanzanian shillings, that is roughly 0.5 dollars per chick. In 2016, Tanzania banned the importation of chicks and fresh poultry meat from Kenya, Uganda, Zambia, South Africa, and the United States to protect local farmers. On October 31st, 2017, the government of Tanzania and its authorities in Arusha destroyed 6,400 chicks imported from Kenya through the Namanga border crossing, and then the ban was later lifted. Most of the day-old chicks are imported from the United States, the United Kingdom, and South Africa, with substantial quantities imported from Kenya and Zambia. Well, most of them are imported from United Kingdom and South Africa, with substantial quantities imported from Kenya and Tanzania. Now, this comes after that 2016 ban of the different particular, comes after the 20 October 31st, when the government in Arusha destroyed 6,400 chicks that were imported from Kenya through the Namanga border crossing. Now, as well, in 2016, Tanzania banned the importation of chicks and fresh poultry meat from Kenya, Uganda, Zambia, South Africa, and the United States. This was to protect local farmers. So you can see where the ban comes in, is to protect those farmers that are actually dealing in poultry farming in Tanzania. And Tanzania has come out to ban day-old chicks imports again. Now, this imposed total ban on the importation of day-old chicks takes effect next week as it seeks to protect its local hatcheries and limit the inflow of substandard chicks on the market. So that is where the Tanzanian government is going on to ensure that things become very easier for the local farmers and to become easier for the local producers in the market in Tanzania, or the local Tanzanian market. So I think this is something you could actually think of and say, how about that from Tanzania, and how about that from the authorities in there, and how about that particular one to be challenged by the other African countries to ensure that local produce and local farmers are given priorities or are prioritized when it comes to a monopoly sort of in regards to farming and adding value to agriculture. So is what the Tanzanian government is ensuring with this particular move to ban imports of day one chicks again. Well, switching our eyes to the western part of Africa, we head to Ghana, as Ghana's parliament has passed tax exemptions bill for 2022. This one around this time will be to provide a tax exemption regime for the country in Ghana. The bill, which would set clear eligibility criteria for tax exemptions, also provide for the monitoring, evaluation and enforcement of exemptions. Further, the bill would explore delivering a regulatory regime for monitoring tax exemptions to ensure that exemptions granted were used for the intended purposes, as well as control the abuse of the existing exemption regime. It would strengthen the monitoring role of the Ministry of Finance and that of Parliament on the management of exemptions when assented to by President Nana Addo Akufo-Addo. Now, Kenny Ofori-Atta, the Minister of Finance, on Tuesday, July 19, 2022, confirmed to Parliament that the country lost about 27 billion Ghanaian cedi to tax exemptions granted to some businesses between 2008 and 2020. According to Ofori-Atta, it was only in 2020 that they lost revenue, and this lost revenue worsened to about 1.8 billion Ghanaian cedi since 2008. The bill was presented to Parliament on Tuesday, July 5th, 2022, and read for the first time by Francis Asenso Boache, who is the Minister for Works and Housing, on behalf of Ofori-Atta, the Finance Minister in Ghana. It was later referred to the Finance Committee of Parliament, where they considered the bill under a certificate of urgency. Going by the committee's report on the bill, which was submitted by Kwaku Kwateng, who is the chairman of the Finance Committee, it was noted that the biggest threat to Ghana's domestic revenue mobilization strategy were the exemptions, and of which they decided to work upon it. According to the report, the committee was informed that tax exemptions created significant difficulties for developing countries and ran counter to the objective of strengthening domestic resource mobilization. It is projected that the exemptions for the 2022 financial year are expected to be lowered by about 500 million Ghanaian cedi with the passage of the bill. Now, looking further, the bill would explore delivering a regulatory regime for monitoring tax exemptions to ensure that exemptions granted were used to the intended purposes, as well as control the abuse of the existing exemption regime. This particular bill will explore delivering a regulatory regime for monitoring tax exemptions, and of which these ones will ensure that exemptions granted were used for intended purposes, as well as control the abuse of existing exemption regime in Ghana. So the Parliament in Ghana passed the Tax Exemptions Bill 2022, and of which this is to provide for a tax exemption regime in the country. Now, this bill apparently would set clear eligibility criteria for tax exemptions, and it would also provide for the monitoring, evaluation, as well as enforcement of the exemptions in Ghana, and to ensure that the Ghanaians benefit from more of this particular tax exemptions in there. So you would actually see how Ghana and the other African countries are pushing over for new bills that are being passed by Parliament. And so we as well expect some bills to be passed in Uganda here, one of which will as well be one which regards information misuse and then social media. And then all those are some of the bills that we highly expect in terms of projection for this particular financial year. All right. Now, still with the African continent, we head to the southern part of Africa, southern and central part of Africa, that is with Zimbabwe. Now, to stem inflation, Zimbabwe has debuted gold coins as legal tender. We've been following up on developments with the fact that Zimbabwe's inflation and the issue of the Zimbabwean dollar losing value. They decided to switch for options and look for alternatives, one of which was using the United States dollar, and then secondly, this time around, they've minted gold coins that will be used as legal tender. Zimbabwe now launched gold coins to be sold to the public in a bid to tame runaway inflation that has further eroded the country's unstable currency. The unprecedented move was announced Monday by the country's central bank, which is the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe, to boost confidence in the local currency. Trust in Zimbabwe's currency is low after people saw their savings wiped out by hyperinflation in 2008, which reached 5 billion% according to the International Monetary Fund. Now, with strong memories of that disastrous period and many retailers refusing Zimbabwe's currency, Zimbabweans today prefer to scramble on the illegal market to for scarce US dollars to keep at the home as savings for daily transactions. Now, the central bank disbursed 2,000 coins to commercial banks on Monday. This is the first batch of the coins was minted outside the country, but eventually they will be produced locally, according to the governor of the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe, John Magundia. Now, when you look at the moderate high demand for the US dollar, the coins can be used for purchases in shops, depending on whether the shop has enough change, according to John Magundia, who is the governor of the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe. The government is trying to moderate the very high demand for the US dollar because the high demand is not being matched by the supply. So, according to the Zimbabwean economist Prosper Chitambara, the expectation is that there will also be moderation in terms of the depreciation of the local currency, which should have some kind of stabilizing effect in terms of pricing of goods. Any individual or company can buy the gold coins from authorized agents such as banks using the local currency or foreign currencies, and purchasers can choose to keep the coins at a bank or take them home. Now, according to an announcement by the country's central bank, foreigners can only buy the coins in foreign currency. That was an announcement still. So Mosi Uatunya, which is the local Tonga language, refers to the Victoria Falls, now is the name that was given to these particular coins. The coins will have liquid asset status. That is, it will be capable of being easily converted to cash, and it will be tradable locally and internationally. The coin may also be used for transactional purposes, the central bank added. So people holding the coins can only trade them for cash after 180 days from the date of buying, according to the bank. Now, also, the coins, each weighing 1 troy ounce with a purity of 22 carats, can also be used as security for loans and credit facilities, according to the Central Bank of Zimbabwe. Now, the price of the coins will be determined by the international market rate for an ounce of gold, plus 5% for the cost of producing the coin. At the time of the launch on Monday, the cost of the Mosi Uatunya coin was $1,824 internationally. Gold coins are used in countries such as China, South Africa, and Australia to hedge against inflation as an investment opportunity. Although they are not widely used as currency as envisaged by Zimbabwe's central bank, Zimbabwe has substantial gold deposits and exports of the precious metal. It's one of the South Africa's country's major foreign currency earners. Gold production, if you're to look at this particular situation, improved to about 30 tons in 2021 compared to 19 tons in 2020, according to official figures. And then the small-scale producers such as poorly regulated artisanal miners contributed 19 tons of the gold delivered in 2021, according to official figures. However, the country is estimated to be losing about $100 million worth of gold monthly to smuggling. Then the Home Affairs Minister Kazembe Kazembe has revealed that smuggling is costing the country about 36 tons of gold annually, according to a report issued this month by the Center for Natural Resource Governance, a local natural resources watchdog. Legally, all gold mined in Zimbabwe is supposed to be sold to the central bank, but many producers prefer to smuggle the gold out of the country in order to get payment in United States dollars. So you can see Zimbabwe, as the citizens in Zimbabwe are still fearing memories of the 2008 and 2009 hyperinflation that led to the crisis, whereby Zimbabweans had to carry sacks of money to buy essential commodities. And it's exactly the same scenarios that was about to happen. That is why the government had resorted to the use of the US dollars again, as well as the South African rand, and also now gold coins have been minted. Let's have this report again from the United States Agency for International Development, USAID, which has promised $1.3 billion to help the Horn of Africa, which has been hit by severe drought in the past few months. Now, the Horn of Africa is facing its worst drought in over 40 years. As a result, 18 million people in the countries of Somalia, Ethiopia, and Kenya are going hungry. And according to the United States Agency for International Development, after the agency met with residents of a village in Turkana, that is the northwest part of Kenya, on July 23rd to find ways to improve their support on helping them in regards to famine and hunger, as well as drought. Other humanitarian actors such as the recent month called for urgent action after visiting the region. Now, this time around, the United States Agency for International Development's administrator, that is Samantha Power, promised to finance more than $1 billion of assistance. All of their livestock has been apparently wiped out, and it has been disseminated by the drought. So they are talking about the massive loss of livelihood and the risk of the massive loss of life, according to declared Power after speaking to locals. The official said that funding would go to partners who are doing everything from building boreholes to repairing boreholes so that they can be source of water, to providing food and ensuring that things do happen in that particular perspective and in that particular regard. Now, when you look at USAID, the particular images are coming in from our next report regarding Egypt. But as we're summing up with details to do with the United States Agency for International Development in regards to humanitarian actors such as the United Nations Relief Chief Martin Griffith, who have in recent months called for urgent action after visiting the region. Now, this time round, USAID's administrator Samantha Power promised to finance more than $1 billion of assistance, and of which all of their livestock has been wiped out. If you're to look at the details coming in from that in the areas of the Horn of Africa. Now, according to Samantha Power, after speaking to locals, said that the funding would go to partners who are doing everything from building boreholes or repairing boreholes so that they can be some source of water, to providing food, providing medicines as well. Now, this situation is showing no sign of improvement, and the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, that is IGAD, warned on Friday that a total of more than 50 million people could face severe food insecurity this year. Now, the Horn of Africa is apparently facing its worst drought in over 40 years. As a result, 18 million people in Ethiopia, Somalia, and Kenya are going hungry, according to the United States Agency for International Development. Now, when you look at the other USAID's administrator Samantha Power promised to finance more than $1 billion of assistance to the region to ensure that they overcome the effects of drought that have led to famine and death of a number of people between these particular countries, Somalia and Ethiopia, and also Kenya. And then lastly, from the international updates, we head to Egypt, as the Egyptian small-scale farmers are struggling to survive. The smallholders may have a major role in feeding the country's 103 million population, but they are still struggling to survive. Many say they are facing difficulties to sell their harvests on markets and end up being cash-strapped and indebted, such as Zakaria Abdul Dahab, who grows onions, and he says that apparently farmers are dead, especially the small farmers, as they weren't able to buy anything, no sell crops. And then when you look at how the farmers pay They have rental fees that they're supposed to pay in regards to land rental fees, and they are supposed to as well drink and eat as any other person. Now, financing and marketing, as well as infrastructure hurdles, create massive gaps between supply and demand. And with the sharp surge in global prices due to the pandemic and the war in Ukraine, several farmers can no longer pay water bills or pesticides. Now, some farmers have abandoned their lands. They are neither sold nor planted. They do not know what to do with them. They've lost profits, no profit at all, and the lack of unions and cooperatives to help these particular farmers face challenges and understand the system is a problem. And when you look at the other issue, Egypt is facing problems related to food security, water consumption and shortage, as well as problems related to employment and financial inclusion. And then, according to the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, small farms cultivating less than 3 acres of land produce some 47% of Egypt's field crops. So they literally don't produce a lot of what happens, but they produce a sum of a few of these things, and that is exactly what you could see in here. Now, Egyptian small-scale farmers are struggling to survive during these hard times, as they are actually playing a major role in feeding the country's 103 million people in regards to the small-scale production that they have. But however, they are facing some challenges in regards to drought, and also their harvests being affected by the weather conditions in there. All right, now with that, we wind up our first hour of the show. Let's break down some of the key stories that we've been having from the international lab. We started with Tanzania, where they've apparently banned day-old chicks imports again. The first ban was in 2016 before they switched it off to 2017. Now there is another one that has actually been banned. They've actually now imposed a ban on the importation. This will take effect next week in order to protect local hatcheries and limit the inflow of substandard chicks. Then Ghana's parliament has passed a tax exemption bill for 2022. This particular one is to provide for a tax exemption regime in the country. Then also Zimbabwe has issued new gold coins. Now this is to stem inflation as they debut gold coins as legal tender to supplement the US dollar and the South African rand, which had come in as an alternative with the fact that Zimbabwe is facing different issues in regards to inflation. Now also we switch to Egypt, where Egyptian small-scale farmers continues to struggle to survive, and also the United States Agency for International Development seeks to help out people living in the Horn of Africa, that is Somalia, Kenya and Ethiopia, with the ongoing drought and famine that they are facing, where most of the people in there have apparently died due to those particular natural calamities. So you can definitely see that perspective from the international updates. This comes in the first hour to give you more updates as they happen. Well, the updates do continue now. After the break, we're getting into the press review to look more from the side of the papers, which stories are making headlines from the world of business, and I should tell you quite a number of those are in there. So stick around with me at 8 a.m. when we start with the second hour of the show. We start with the press review as we furthermore move on with the business tips, business quotes and more SMB updates. Good morning.